Uptown Charlotte is the second largest banking center in the country behind New York City. It's the headquarters of banking giants like Bank of America. 120,000 people work in Uptown Charlotte across 33 million square feet of office space. And it is the epicenter for a city that is surging to almost have 1 million residents. But if you go to Uptown Charlotte, you'll start to notice something is just off. It's like going to a sold-out concert only for the venue to be eerily empty. Things are just not adding up. In this video, I'm going to discuss in excruciating detail all the issues that is holding this urban core back. Without addressing these problems, the city is never going to be able to become a great city. I am an architect that has worked in Uptown for half a decade, and I have had these thoughts stewing in my brain for a really long time, and I just need to get it all out. All of it. And at the very end, I will rate Uptown Charlotte on 8 categories and give it 1 score to compare to other downtowns. So go ahead and get a drink and a snack, and let's just jump right into it. Before Charlotte was a banking capital, before the skyline, before the sprawl, the whole city began at one intersection, Trade and Tryon. Settlers gathered at the intersection, and by 1755 it became Charlottetown, named for Queen Charlotte, which is where the nickname the Queen City came from. And this is where downtown Charlotte began to grow and the city thrived. In the mid-20th century, racist urban renewal practices tore through downtown Charlotte and destroyed the historic core in the name of progress. Blocks of homes, shops, and culture were erased for highways, offices, and parking decks. By the 1970s, downtown was rebranded as Uptown to spark new life. I bet some politician thought it was some genius idea to rename it. And ever since that destruction, Uptown Charlotte has been trying to rebuild itself. Classically, Uptown is organized into 4 wards, split by Trade Street and Tryon Street, and surrounded by the Interstate 277 loop on 3 sides and Interstate I-77 to the northwest. The construction of these highways fractured the city grid and destroyed neighborhoods, and this damage will never be reversed. There are proposals to cap parts of the highway with a park, but it feels like putting lipstick on a pig. But I will get into that more as the video goes on. Now that the surrounding borders of Uptown have been defined, for the sake of this video, I have divided Uptown into 6 distinct areas. So here is how I'm dividing Uptown. We have the Central Business District. No one calls it that, but for the sake of this video, I need to differentiate it from the rest of Uptown. You have the Stadium area. You have the Gateway area. You have the 4th Ward Urban Village area. You have the 1st Ward Village area. And last but not least, you have the 2nd Ward Government area. So I'm starting with the area of Uptown that most people are familiar with and have probably visited, as over 18 million people a year come to this stretch of Tryon Street in Uptown a year. This is right in the heart of the business district, and this is where Bank of America has its stunningly beautiful headquarters. I mean, just look at this masterpiece by architect Cesar Pelli. Bank of America has several towers on the northern side of the central business area, and Wells Fargo has half a dozen on the south side, with a lot of other office buildings and more banks in between those little areas. So to put it lightly, this area is filled to the brim with people working for banks. After all, Charlotte is the 2nd largest banking center in the US, and you'll believe it after seeing the endless number of financial institutions and, of course, the famous Charlotte finance bros walking to Whole Foods for lunch. This wealth, of course, can be seen not just in Uptown, but around the whole city, in the big houses, the fancy cars, and of course the greatest symbol of that wealth is how nice the Charlotte skyline is. It really is a top-tier skyline with stunning bank towers lighting up at night. But in the same way bacon is appealing in your breakfast burrito, going to the slaughterhouse to see how the bacon is made can change your view about bacon. So when you look at the base of this wonderful skyline, you'll notice right away how much of the streetscape is dedicated to massive lobbies for financial institutions. Again, Charlotte has an amazing skyline, but a building is only as good as the streetscape it creates around it. And many of these buildings are failing miserably. Just look at the dead zones around this one. And this is going to be a constant theme we're going to see around most of these office towers in this area. Now, that isn't to say that they are all poorly designed. I do like how the Truist Tower has a dedicated plaza at its base. It's a great scale with plenty of seating for different group sizes. That's patio seating for restaurants and a nice amount of greenery, even an art piece. But for every good example, there are 5 bad ones. I mean, just look at this blank wall, or how the First Citizens Bank, you can't even tell where the entrance is. It's around the side next to the service entrance. The newer Barings building looks clean and well designed with its circular glass facade, but it's just a corporate lobby and you have to go around the side to enter. With all these design touches, it feels like Tryon Street is mostly for people working 9 to 5 in these buildings and not much else. And one thing you'll notice about this supposed Main Street is the lack of historic storefront buildings. And you'll see these kind of buildings in other North Carolina cities, but just not in Charlotte. Even Greensboro, which has plenty of issues with its downtown, still has a historic core with shops and bars to hang out in. Charlotte has destroyed about 95% of the building stock that used to be built before 1960 in Uptown, and it shows. The historic buildings they have left are lovely and I love them. I just wish there were a lot more of them left. But that's okay, because so far we've only looked at one street, Tryon Street, and surely Uptown has more streets than just Tryon, and there's probably a cool area on those streets. Am I right? So Uptown Charlotte isn't just one street. I mean, that would be crazy, right? So it's mostly one street. Let me explain. Tryon Street is where almost everything that you'd want to see or go to for someone visiting Uptown would want to see. But you'll find if you wander off onto a perpendicular street, you'll start to notice something. You'll pass parking entrances, loading zones after blank walls. And I get it. There is a sizable topographic change from Tryon to College or Church Street, because as stated earlier, Tryon was founded on a high point in the county. Now, designing a building for that change in elevation is challenging without creating these transition spaces. And unless you stair step your ground floor of your office tower, which they could have done, but since everyone drives in Uptown anyway, the top priority for most of these buildings when they were designed was locating a parking entrance in the building. And where better to do that from their perspective on the side street with the topographic change? And that's what everyone did. So the result of that is that we end up with a lot of awful, dark, blank side streets. Just look at it. From this point of view, it doesn't look like a lively center. It looks like you're behind your local Walmart or something. Trucks are pulling in here, and the sun is blotted out by this pedestrian bridge. More on those hamster cages later. And it's most of these perpendicular streets. Here's another one. It's a parking entrance across from another parking entrance with a blank wall next to it. And no, these giant murals don't actually help. They just are eye candy. So you can see how this really fuels the feeling that Charlotte is a one corridor downtown space, because it feels bad to venture to see the other parallel streets. I do want to mention good examples when I can. A new development that has navigated this topographic change really well is the Ally Bank Center at the south end of Uptown. With its terraced green space, its human scale retail that they've placed near the street, and the way that it stair steps along the road is actually a really good design. But again, the good example is in a sea of bad examples. But suppose you decided to venture out to the roads that are parallel to Tryon Street, which of course is College Street and Church Street. You'll notice Church Street has a bit more historic buildings on it, with an old church and the opening alley to the Great Lotta Arcade, which is actually a really cool place with a lot of nice little shops inside. So if you ever visit Uptown, go check this place out. I give it 2 thumbs up, frankly. But of course, you'll see so many historic parking garages. Honestly, this road has so many parking garages on it, I just can't even understand why this is the case. Honestly, 2 thumbs down. And in case you haven't already noticed, a big theme in Uptown Charlotte, there used to be something here, but now there is an office building or a parking garage, or even worse, a surface lot. Just look at the intersection of Church and 3rd Street. It's literally all parking, and we're so close to the center of trade and Tryon that without even crossing the street from this famous historic center, urban life has already transitioned into a deserted parking wasteland. There are some newer developments on Church Street that give me hope, like the Grand Bohemian Hotel. It has a good amount of retail and it conceals a lot of parking better than most of the buildings uptown, and it's a very handsome building. Honestly, great job. Also, Uptown's premier city center park is on Church Street as well, Premier Bearden Park, which is fairly new. It's about 15-ish years old. I like aspects of this park, and I'm really glad it's here, so I don't want to come off too much of a snob. Some elements about the park do feel very cheap and not very timeless. Still, Charlotte needed a park here, and I think it serves its purpose, so almost 2 thumbs up, Charlotte. I don't know where else to say this part. Charlotte draws in people from all over, as I mentioned earlier, but it severely lacks any kind of recognizable monument, or memorials, or landmarks. All I am asking for is something civic for us Charlotteans to unite around. It doesn't have to be the Eiffel Tower, although I wouldn't complain if it was something of that scale. Why don't we have our own Space Needle? What about something like the St. Louis Arch? Or even a giant Ferris wheel? I mean, I'd even settle for a giant pyramid with a Bass Pro Shop like Memphis. But no, all we get is the Disco Chicken, which is not big, it's not meaningful enough to be a symbol for the city. There are no plans right now to do anything like that, but I really wish there was. Jumping to the other street parallel to Tryon, on the other side is College Street. It's kind of Tryon-esque, but a little more of a corporate vibe than Tryon, if that was even possible. I am admittedly a huge fan of postmodern architecture, which I've talked about in previous videos. So there are a couple of good examples of postmodern architecture on this road that I have always admired when walking on College. 301 South College is a great example. I'll never forgive them for destroying their 80s clock tower they had in their plaza. But of course, the theme repeats itself from Tryon. This building has the same problem, which it has a lifeless first floor street level. Along College Street, the trees are actually very plentiful here. And there's something I like more about the street than Church Street, and I think I actually like this street more than Tryon. It feels like I've traveled back in time to the 1990s. Maybe there's something nostalgic about that for me that's giving me rose-tinted glasses. But also, this is where Johnny Burrito is, which, if you haven't had it yet, you absolutely have to try it. It's so good. If you're in Uptown, check out Johnny Burrito. But of course, going down College Street, there's always one development that I see, and it's whenever I get close to the epicenter that I start to lose that nostalgia I was building up. So where to even start with Epicenter? After all, Epicenter was built in 2008. It was the hottest place for nightlife in Charlotte at the time. There were tons of cool bars and restaurants. I remember going to a bowling alley there once, and I was just amazed by all the people out on a Friday night. Cut to today, it looks like a cross between an abandoned mall and a Scooby-Doo ghost town. The bars, the restaurants, and most importantly, the people are gone. So many empty storefronts where local places once were. Epicenter has had an issue with crime in the past, and it's seen as a place where nothing really happens anymore. It's a dated landmark with no clear future now, and it occupies a massive block right in the heart of Uptown Charlotte. Honestly, it felt really sad to walk around in the Epicenter. Felt like I was stumbling into some liminal backrooms type space. It was really eerie, actually. And unfortunately, it is a symbol of how Uptown once was the place to be. But with the rise of other neighborhoods in Charlotte, like South End, Noda, Plaza Midwood, people just aren't drawn to Uptown anymore after hours. I've heard rumblings about developers might plan to do something to refresh Epicenter. I think they've even changed the name recently, but the name Epicenter is still on the building, so I don't know what they're doing there. But nothing concrete has happened yet, and honestly, it'll probably just sit like this for the next decade. If you're interested to see a little bit more of Epicenter and what it feels like to walk around in such an empty place, I'll leave a link to my walking around Charlotte video that I recorded in my second channel in the description to this channel if you're interested in seeing that. So speaking of awful things in Uptown Charlotte, let's segue into the Overstreet Mall. Charlotte, North Carolina is not Minneapolis. With terrifically cold winters, Charlotte has mild winters and yes, warm summers. And frankly, all the people moving here from New York need to stop whining about how hot and humid it is. I get it, get over it. We do not need climate-controlled hamster mazes of pedestrian bridges that take people from their office to another office parking garage to Showmars, and this is not to speak ill of Showmars, I actually like that restaurant. This was developed in the late 70s, a time when many markers of Charlotte life were destroyed in the name of racism and classism. The developers of the Overstreet Mall wanted to create kind of a biodome that only let in the approved office type and insulated them from everything else in Uptown Charlotte. Today, the Overstreet Mall has many restaurants, and you can get to and from most office buildings around the Tryon and College Street corridor using the sky bridges. But as you would suspect, this drains life from the street and puts it in climate-controlled zones that effectively shut down when office hours are over, destroying any chance you'd have to visit these fine dining establishments after hours. When Overstreet Mall kicked off, I consider that the moment downtown Charlotte was put in the ground and this plastic thing called Uptown was born. And it's an identity that they are still trying to figure out today. I do want to say Uptown does have some cultural amenities. There has been a real effort to bring some of that life that was lost in the 20th century back into Uptown today. Just look at the Beckler Museum of Modern Art and the Mint Museum Uptown. These are two great examples of modern architecture. I have a love for going to art museums, and I have some great memories of going to many growing up with my parents and sister. So something about them just makes me very nostalgic, so I'm glad they're here. A new library is opening up on North Tryon, designed by Norwegian architects Snøhetta, and I'm actually really looking forward to seeing what this one looks like when it opens. The Discovery Place Science Center is another great spot that I remember going to as a kid. And of course, there is the NASCAR Hall of Fame. If that's your thing, you might enjoy it. I just hate how barren the street level feels around it. The convention center across the street doesn't help as well. A bunch of lifeless facades here. Another positive trend to mention is that there has been a major effort to build residential buildings in Uptown for about the past 20 years. And even if it has slowed down a little bit as of recently, it went from a very small population living in Uptown in the 1970s, right after they did all their horrible so-called urban renewal efforts, to around 25,000 people in 2025. And this is really encouraging to see, and I hope it continues at an even faster pace. The more people living in an area, the more commute times drop for everyone, since more people can walk and spend less time in traffic. It also increases the demand for after-hour businesses like restaurants, shops, and other services in Uptown. But one of the trends that you'll notice in Charlotte is that South End is becoming the premier place for people who want an urban lifestyle, not Uptown. My feeling is that Uptown just isn't viewed as favorably as South End today. And I think that's because of the issues I've been describing today. And luckily, people can still get to Uptown via transit. Charlotte does have a small transit rail network with two lines currently operating, the Lynx Blue Line and the Lynx Gold Line. The Blue Line has been a major catalyst for growth in Charlotte. It's a huge reason why South End has exploded in growth. Just look at the rail trail next to the line. It's amazing how many people gather there. People can live nearby, take the light rail to work in Uptown, and live a semi-car-free lifestyle. But when we look at the impact the light rail has had on Uptown itself, it has barely driven any meaningful development there, and it feels neglected in comparison to South End. After decades of planning, they're finally building a pedestrian bridge connecting the vibrant rail trail that runs parallel to the Blue Line in South End to Uptown, which has long been needed. So it seems the city is trying to improve the lifelessness around the Blue Line, but this alone won't fix the built environment that currently surrounds the Blue Line. Seriously, why are there so many parking decks next to a transportation meant for people not using cars? It doesn't make any sense. The Gold Line, which runs perpendicular to the Blue Line, has its own issues. It's a streetcar, meaning the tracks are mixed in with traffic and not separated from the cars. It can only go as fast as traffic, and for some reason, it isn't given priority at lights, so it's very slow. It's really only useful if you're not in a hurry to get somewhere. And people know this, so ridership is low and the service is infrequent, making it hard to plan your day around it. The devil is in the details, and unfortunately, this line has so many issues to fix before people actually start using it more, or before developers feel confident in building more housing around this line that feels like it could be obsolete soon, before people actually start using it more. I could probably spend an hour just on the central area, but there's so much I want to tell you about in Uptown Charlotte that I need to keep moving. Shifting northwest, we are now going to look at the second area being what I call the stadium area. There are two stadiums here, the Panthers/Charlotte FC Stadium and the Charlotte Knights baseball field. I'm a bit torn on the placement of these. Bank of America Stadium is okayish. I like that you can walk to Uptown from it, and it's not too far from the Lynx Blue Line, just a couple blocks into the central business area. It isn't completely surrounded by surface lots like so many stadiums in the US are, but I do hate how everything that was on the site was destroyed to make it, which I won't go into now, but these stadium districts are usually lifeless when there's no game happening, and it's the same situation here. I feel a lot of Charlotte people are going to disagree with me here, but the truest field for the Knights, while being a fine minor league park, I hate the placement of it in Uptown. It creates yet another super block here, making it take forever to walk around the blank walls of the stadium. As negative as I've been about the placement of this baseball field, it was parking lots upon parking lots back in the day. It is hard to create a thriving city from that base, so I do give the city a little credit for improving it at least. But once you created a massive super block, someday when they build a major league baseball stadium somewhere else in the city, it's going to be very hard to make this a normal sized block again. After all, it is extremely wasteful, but stadiums in the US have a very short shelf life and are often demolished after only a few decades of use, and this will probably be the case with the stadiums in this area someday as well. There is one very important development the city has been trying to get off the ground for a very long time, and it still hasn't started construction yet. It's near the stadiums. This is the Charlotte Gateway Station. It's meant to be a multimodal transportation hub with a new Amtrak station, replacing the current one that's way out of the way in the north side of the city, and it's extremely small, and it might be one of the most dated buildings in all of North Carolina. There is also a planned light rail extension here, the Lynx Silver Line. I have seen plans to include a bus terminal here as well. And of course, it connects to the existing Gold Line, which I touched on earlier. The development is supposed to be a public-private partnership with a lot of moving parts, and there are meant to be mixed-use office towers planned above it. Interestingly enough, I was even working at an architecture firm doing a feasibility study for how these buildings could fit on the side with all these various constraints. But that was in 2019, 7 years ago, and there's been no movement on the site since then. It's just an empty lot. They have reconfigured some of the railroad tracks so the station can connect, but that's about as far as it's gone so far. You can see where the stairs to the platform will eventually go, but right now this just looks like an abandoned site. with no clear future. Over the tracks from the Gateway Station area is probably the most dysfunctionally designed area of Uptown and possibly even the entire city of Charlotte. It's very isolated from Uptown and from the rest of the city, honestly. It has a lot of small, disconnected pockets. Near the Bank of America Stadium, but on the other side of the tracks, there is a large coming soon Iron District site. I've seen the plans for this development, and it looks like it could become eventually a really nice, well-developed area. But whatever ends up being there, it will basically be an island to itself, being that this is surrounded by I-77, 277, and the railroad tracks. All these roads act like a giant wall that will keep this development being very sequestered. And just to demonstrate how horribly designed this section of Uptown is, there is basically only one main road, Cedar Street, that connects this gateway area. And this road has been closed for months and months now due to the world's slowest construction. So you have to leave Gateway Village just to get to another part of Gateway Village, which is absurd. And yes, this is a common theme that I'll be coming back to because it happens a lot in this area. A large part of this area is still single-family homes that seem to be densifying actually pretty quickly. I just wish they'd fix the weird parts of the street grid while they're at it and connect things to the commercial center of Gateway Village instead of being so disconnected. The commercial center of Gateway Village is actually quite nice by Charlotte standards. It has a mix of residential, offices, and even Johnson & Wales University there. There's just something about this area that feels urban, like a real city. In fact, this might be one of my favorite, or at least my second favorite area of Uptown. I'll get into my favorite when I talk more about 4th Ward. There's more public spaces here, more places to hang out, and more retail than we've seen so far in a lot of places in Uptown. And honestly, I do like the architecture and how everything's designed. This area is bordered by Elmwood Cemetery, which was established in 1853, and it's a historic graveyard with a lot of fascinating gravestones to look at. I love to walk through this area when the weather is nice. It's a really lovely place. I think in October, I'm going to make a video specifically about the cemetery and cemetery design in general. But if you guys visit, please don't be weird about it either. One time I was walking through this park and I saw a goth couple getting hot and heavy and making out on a gravestone, and it was very inappropriate to say the least. I do not condone that, so don't do that if you come here. Also, I don't know why there were so many headless statues here. There's obviously a very creepy vibe, and when I was filming, I felt like I kept seeing things in the corner of my eye, but it was probably just the wind. Anyway, I feel like this place doesn't get the love it deserves, so go check it out if you can during the daytime. Looking at a place that I have seen even more inappropriate levels of public displays of affection is the North Carolina Music Factory. This was once an old industrial site that has been converted into a multi-venue complex with indoor and outdoor spaces. I do really like that the site has been reused, but honestly, it might as well be on the outskirts of town. There's basically no good way to get to public transit from this area. And if dealing with Ticketmaster isn't scary enough, unless you want to cut through Elmwood Cemetery at night, which I definitely do not recommend, you have to leave Uptown just to get back to Uptown. That makes no sense if you want venues like this to be easy to access and actually create activity within a city. But it basically feels like it was put in solitary confinement. At some point, the city needs to come up with a real solution to connect this area to Charlotte's Uptown core. Now, I have my own ideas of what could happen, but honestly, I don't even know if they see it as a problem, because from their perspective, if you can drive to it, it's accessible enough, so why fix it from their perspective? With all that dysfunction, I want to look at an area that's a little more functional. 4th Ward Urban Village is back over the tracks in the northeast area of Uptown. It has one of Charlotte's oldest surviving neighborhoods, with many Victorian-era homes from the late 1800s that were saved from demolition in the 1970s through preservation efforts. It also has some of the oldest multifamily residential buildings in Charlotte. To me, Fourth Ward Urban Village is so close to being the best urban residential area in Charlotte. The only thing keeping it from competing with South End is that most of the land is already developed, and many of the businesses and amenities here in this area are very dated. For example, the Harris Teeter grocery store here, which is one of only 2 grocery stores in Uptown Charlotte, is very small and doesn't have everything you need for daily life. Many of the apartment buildings in this area aren't aging amazingly well, with some just looking like suburban apartment buildings from South Charlotte. But what is nice is that there is an interesting mix of beautiful historic homes, condos, duplexes, and all the way to very tall high-rise apartment buildings. Fourth Ward Park is a very pleasant park to walk through, as well as the Old Settlers Cemetery that is kind of the gateway for this area to get to the central business district area. These 2 parks are actually really enjoyable to take a moment to rest and relax in. Currently, there seems to be a little more life in this area during the week and not that much on the weekend. I really hope we see more development here in the coming decades. Also, it will be served by the future Silver Line, which would be a light rail similar to the Blue Line, and it would be making transit more available here, which I think will make this a much more attractive option for, say, millennials that want to live in an urban district. But overall, I give this area almost 2 thumbs up. So now I need to transition to First Ward Village, which I actually have a lot less nice things to say about. But really quickly, if you enjoy content about making better cities, more walkable streets, less car dependence, and demanding more from places like Charlotte, please like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, consider joining my Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. It really helps keeping these videos coming. Links are in the description below. First Ward is separated from the central business area by First Ward Park, the University of North Carolina at Charlotte's Uptown campus, and some new residential buildings. And that sounds like a good start for a neighborhood, but unbelievably, it's also separated by blocks and blocks of surface parking lots. I mean, there is just so much parking in this area. It's basically a demilitarized zone of parking between the First Ward Village and Uptown. First Ward Urban Village sits in the eastern corner of Uptown, almost like it's being punished. The horribly planned Interstate 277 walls this neighborhood off from connecting to the Optimus Park neighborhood or the Belmont neighborhood to the north. And it makes this area of Uptown feel super isolated from everything around it. The houses, the duplexes, and apartment buildings themselves are fine. I understand they were built around the 1990s, but I have no idea why this area barely has any restaurants, no grocery stores. There's basically just nothing to walk to from this area. This poor planning creates a place that looks urban but discourages that lifestyle. When you have to drive to go literally anywhere to do anything you need to do, it defeats the whole purpose of putting this neighborhood in your city's downtown area. It's just another example of the city's constant trend of giant missed opportunities to create meaningful spaces for the people who live here. Sure, you can fix developments, but it takes decades to fix typically, and it's usually very expensive. When you design these kind of places, you need to build them right to begin with, and that has to do with the zoning and allowing for businesses to be in this area that people can walk to. Now, moving on to our last place in Uptown Charlotte. This is perhaps the area that has the most amount of big missed opportunities and injustices. And this is the Second Ward government area. It starts over the light rail from the central business district with the Spectrum Center where the Hornets play. Again, it's like the Panthers Stadium. There are some good things about locating your stadium or arena in a dense area near a light rail, but it's going to be a dead zone when no games are happening at that time. And that's the case when I visited. The arena is adjacent to a bus terminal, which there are plans to scrap and rebuild this bus terminal at the Gateway Station. So I don't know what the future of this block holds. So it will be interesting to see what happens in this area in the future. This area is home to the lifeless and unremarkable government district of Charlotte. Like First Ward, this area is bordered by even more surface lots and lifeless buildings. I can't imagine anyone would spend any time in this area. There's just nothing really to see or do here unless you are a government official or you're paying like a parking ticket or something. There is only one big civic space in this area, and that is the poorly aged Marshall Park. This is part of a giant debacle, which I will get into now. Brooklyn Village is a long-promised redevelopment project on Uptown Charlotte's edge. It was meant to revitalize this area and provide some kind of restitution for the historic Brooklyn neighborhood that was once destroyed by racism to get rid of a majority black neighborhood in this area in the 1960s. So this project is a private-public partnership with Mecklenburg County. The project is nothing but delay after delay though. The developers request more public funding and they keep changing plans, and it's really frustrating the local community members who have waited decades for progress on this project. And every couple years, they seem to get out a new proposal with new renderings, emphasizing more affordable housing, but it doesn't seem like anything's actually ever going to happen here. Meanwhile, the site that they're looking at is largely undeveloped. Marshall Park, which is part of their development, it's part of a trade deal where I believe the city is going to get a park somewhere else and they're going to develop that area. Nothing has happened on that area for a very long time. So this really is just a symbol for stalled hopes and a long-awaited justice for the displaced residents that I feel probably will never come for them because of how poorly this development has been managed. And even if this development does go through, I-277 will keep it physically cut off from the nearest residential neighborhoods around it, meaning that there is really nowhere to get other than the nearby government center from this project, which is just a sad thought to consider. Now I am going to attempt to summarize my feelings on Uptown Charlotte with my signature downtown subjective experience rating. For walkability, the core is very walkable, but the train tracks, the giant blocks, the parking lots, they really drive the score down. It's a 3 out of 10. For street level activity, if I judge it by try-on alone, I'd actually give it a pretty high rating, but being that I'm rating the entire Uptown area, I have to give it a 2.5 out of 10. Transit, it is served by the Blue Line and it is also served by the Gold Line, but I've stated before the Gold Line is just not very good and a lot of Uptown just is not close enough to the Blue Line. It's a 3 out of 10. For mixed use balance, again, the core, there's quite a lot of mixed use there, but going out of the core, there's just not very much. It's a 2.5 out of 10. For parking coverage, there is just so much parking in Uptown Charlotte, as I've talked about before. It's a 3 out of 10. Public space quality, there just aren't enough parks, and the parks that are there just aren't good enough in my opinion. I give it a 2 out of 10. For skyline and architecture, there are a lot of amazing buildings in Uptown Charlotte that are beautifully designed, but there are also a lot of buildings that have been demolished and a lot of missing space because of that. So I have to give it a 5 out of 10. And for growth and momentum, Charlotte is always growing and moving forward. For that, I have to give it a 6 out of 10. That leaves it with a final score of 24.5 out of 80. This score does leave a lot of room for improvement, and it may seem like I'm being overly harsh, but I do have high standards, and I believe that Charlotte will eventually rise to those standards to be a great city. When I was 8, my parents got me this book. It's called Skyscrapers. I remember looking at every building and going to the last page, which was a list of the 100 tallest buildings on Earth at the time, and I stumbled upon it. There at the 41st spot in my very own home state of North Carolina was the Bank of America building in Charlotte. I think it was then called the Nations Bank Corporate Center. That actually kicked off my fascination with the city of Charlotte. And from then, I've been fascinated with the city itself and the growth of it and the architecture. It's what inspired me to be an architect. Charlotte has the skyline, the money, the growth, and thousands of people who want a more walkable, livable city. What it needs now is the will to demand better. Better streets, better transit, fewer parking lots, and neighborhoods that actually connect to each other. Cities are never finished things. Every surface lot is a future building, but every bad decision has to be corrected, and it can take a lot of time and money to do that. Charlotte can be great, but only if we stop settling for half urban, half suburban compromises and start expecting more from the place that we call home. Thank you all for watching.